They say a sniper's greatest weapon isn't the rifle, it's patience, the ability to wait, to watch, to become part of the landscape until the perfect moment arrives. Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen had that patience. 3 tours, 87 confirmed kills, every single one a threat, every single one necessary. Until the day she was ordered to take a shot she couldn't forget. The mission brief was straightforward. A high-value target, code-named Architect, was responsible for coordinating attacks that had killed dozens of American soldiers and hundreds of civilians. Intelligence had tracked him to a compound in a remote mountain village. Sarah and her spotter, Corporal Danny Martinez, were inserted 2 clicks out. Their job: observe, confirm identity, eliminate the target. They'd been in position for 16 hours, dug into a rocky outcrop with perfect sight lines to the compound, watching, waiting. The village below went about its day. Women carrying water, children playing in dusty streets, old men sitting in the shade, drinking tea. Then, at 1,420 hours, a vehicle arrived. Black SUV, tinted windows. 4 armed men got out first, scanning the area. Professional, careful. Then the target emerged. That's him, Danny confirmed, checking the photos against the face in his scope. Architect, positive ID. Sarah adjusted her position, settled her breathing. The target was in the open. Clear shot, 740 meters. Wind minimal. Temperature stable. She'd made harder shots in worse conditions. When 2 clicks left, Danny called. You're clear for the shot. Sarah's finger found the trigger, but she didn't pull it because the target wasn't alone. A child had run up to him. A girl, maybe 7 years old. She wrapped her arms around his leg. He smiled, picked her up, kissed her forehead. His daughter. She was laughing, holding up a drawing she'd made. He took it, examined it like it was the most important thing in the world, then pointed to different parts, making her laugh harder. Chen, you have the shot, Danny said. Clear line to center mass. There's a child. She's not in the line of fire. Take the shot. Sarah's crosshairs were steady on the target's head. 1 squeeze, 1 bullet. The man responsible for so much death would be gone. The child would drop to the ground, confused, traumatized but alive. And Sarah would have completed her mission. But she didn't shoot. Chen, Danny's voice was tense now. What's the hold? Give me a second. The target set his daughter down, handed the drawing to one of his guards to hold, started walking toward the compound entrance. The child skipped alongside him, holding his hand, still laughing, still innocent, still unaware that her father had orchestrated attacks that turned other children into orphans. He's moving inside, Danny warned. You're about to lose the shot. Sarah tracked him, smooth, professional, the fundamentals drilled into her. Over thousands of hours of training. Lead the target, account for movement, breathe, squeeze. The target stopped at the door, turned back, waved at his daughter. She waved back, both hands over her head, jumping up and down. Chen, take the shot. Sarah's finger was on the trigger. Pressure building. Just a few more pounds, and it would be over. The mission complete. 1 monster removed from the world. Justice served. But in that moment, looking through her scope at a father saying goodbye to his daughter, Sarah saw something else. She saw the child she'd been, running to her own father when he came home from deployments. The way his face would light up, the way he'd scoop her up and spin her around like she weighed nothing. The way those moments felt like the whole world was right. Her father had been a good man, a Marine, honorable. He fought to protect people. The man in her crosshairs was not a good man. He'd ordered bombings, planned ambushes, sent young men with explosives strapped to their chests into crowded markets. He was a murderer, a terrorist. The world would be better without him. But to that little girl, he was just dad. And if Sarah pulled this trigger right now, that child would watch her father's head explode, would see his blood spray across the ground, would hear the shot that turned her world into a nightmare. She would remember this moment for the rest of her life. It would define her, shape her, maybe destroy her, or maybe it would create another architect, another person so full of rage and pain that violence became the answer, another target for another sniper in another war that never seemed to end. "Command, this is Overwatch 3, Danny said into the radio. "We have positive ID on architect. Clear shot available. Standing by for authorization. Overwatch 3, you are authorized. Execute." The target disappeared inside the compound. The shot was gone. "What the hell, Chen?" Danny lowered his scope and stared at her. "You had him. Why didn't you shoot?" Sarah didn't answer immediately. She was still watching the little girl, who was now showing the drawing to one of the guards. Still happy, still innocent, still living in a world where her father came home every night. "I couldn't do it," Sarah finally said. "Couldn't or wouldn't. Does it matter?" Danny's face darkened. "Yeah, it matters. That man has killed Americans, good people, our people, and you let him walk away because what? He has a kid. Terrorists don't get a pass because they're fathers. I'm not giving him a pass. Sarah struggled to find the words. "I'm not creating another enemy." "What are you talking about? That girl, she's 7, maybe 8 years old. If I take that shot while she's watching, what do you think happens to her? You think she grows up and becomes a teacher, a doctor? Or do you think she spends the rest of her life hating Americans, hating us, wanting revenge for the sniper who murdered her father in front of her? Her father is a terrorist to us, to her. He's the guy who tucks her in at night, who looks at her drawings like they're masterpieces, who makes her laugh." Sarah's voice cracked slightly. "I won't be the one who turns that child into the next high-value target. That's not your call to make. We have orders." "Then I'm refusing them." The words hung in the air between them, heavy, final. In the military, refusing a direct order was one of the worst things you could do. Especially in combat, especially when lives were on the line. Danny grabbed the radio. "Command, Overwatch 3. Target entered compound. Shot is no longer available. Will maintain observation for another opportunity." He clicked off and looked at Sarah with something between anger and disbelief. "I just lied to command for you. You know that, right?" "I know. They're going to ask why you didn't take the shot when you had it. I'll tell them the truth. The truth is, you disobeyed a direct order because you got emotional about a terrorist's kid." Sarah finally turned away from her scope, met Danny's eyes. "The truth is, I'm tired of creating the next generation of enemies. Every person we kill has a family, has friends, has people who will hate us forever because of what we did. I'm not saying Architect doesn't deserve to die. He probably does, but not like that, not in front of his daughter, not in a way that guarantees she'll grow up wanting Americans dead." Danny was quiet for a long moment. "So what? We just let him go?" "No, we wait. We find another opportunity, one that doesn't traumatize a child." Sarah looked back through her scope at the compound. "He'll come out again. They always do. And when he does, when she's not there to see it, I'll take the shot, but I won't do it in front of her. I can't." They maintained their position for another 36 hours. Watched the compound, tracked movements, documented patterns. Sarah barely slept. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw that little girl waving at her father, saw the alternate version where she'd pulled the trigger, saw the blood, heard the screams. The weight was harder than any shot she'd ever taken. Doubt crept in during the long hours. What if Architect never emerged alone again? What if he slipped away while they waited? What if her decision to spare the child meant he'd go on to plan more attacks, kill more people? The weight of command decisions pressed down on her chest like a physical thing. Danny felt it too. She could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the way his jaw clenched when he looked through his spotting scope. They didn't talk much during those hours, just watched, waited, each lost in their own thoughts about what the right choice really was. On the second day, just before dawn, the target emerged, alone, walking to a vehicle parked outside the compound. No guards nearby, no civilians in sight, and definitely no little girl watching. "You have the shot," Danny said quietly. There was no judgment in his voice now, just acknowledgement. This was the moment they'd been waiting for. Sarah settled into position, controlled her breathing, found her center. The target was loading equipment into the vehicle, moving, but predictable. She led him slightly, accounted for distance, for the early morning wind, for every variable that could turn a perfect shot into a miss. Her finger found the trigger. This time, there was no hesitation, no child to witness, no future enemy being created in a moment of trauma. Just a clean shot, a necessary shot, the completion of a mission that had been delayed but not abandoned. And then she squeezed the trigger. The sound echoed across the valley. The target dropped, clean, immediate. One shot. The guards rushed out, but it was already over. By the time they figured out where the shot came from, Sarah and Danny were already packing up, preparing to exfiltrate. Overwatch 3 to command. Target eliminated. Confirm kill. We're moving to extraction point. Confirmed. Overwatch 3. Good work. RTB for debrief. The hike to the extraction point was silent. Sarah's mind was already replaying the shot, analyzing it, confirming the kill. But beneath that professional assessment was something else. Relief. Not just that the mission was complete, but that she'd found a way to complete it without compromising who she was, without creating a wound that would fester for generations. Back at base, Sarah expected consequences, expected questions about the delayed shot, the missed opportunity. Instead, she found something unexpected. Her commanding officer, Colonel James Reeves, called her into his office. He didn't look angry. He looked tired, old, like he'd been fighting wars for too long. "Sit down, Sergeant Chen." Sarah sat, waited. Reeves pulled out a file, opened it. "Intelligence intercepted some chatter from the village after your shot. Want to know what they're saying, sir? They're saying Architect was killed by an American sniper. Clean shot, professional. But here's the interesting part. They're also saying the sniper waited, that she had an earlier opportunity, but held back. And the locals, they can't figure out why." He looked up at her. "Care to explain?" Sarah considered lying, considered giving him some tactical reason. Wind conditions, angle, something professional and clinical. But she was tired of lying. "His daughter was there, sir. She was watching. I didn't want her to see it." Reeves closed the file, leaned back in his chair. "Martinez told me the same thing. Said you refused the shot because of the child." "I didn't refuse, sir. I delayed. The mission was completed. The target was eliminated, but not when ordered." "No, sir, not when ordered." Reeves was quiet for a long time. Sarah waited for the hammer to fall, for the consequences, for her career to end right there in that office. Instead, Reeves said, "My daughter is 7, same age as Architect's kid probably. Every time I'm deployed, every time I have to make a hard call, I think about her. Wonder if I'm making the world safer for her, or just perpetuating a cycle that'll eventually reach her doorstep." He met Sarah's eyes. "You delayed your shot because you were thinking about that cycle, about what kind of war we're really fighting." "Yes, sir. That's not in the manual. That's not what snipers are trained to do." "No, sir, but maybe it should be." Reeves stood up. "Your mission is classified. The delay, the reason for it, all of it stays between us. Officially, you took the shot when the tactical situation was optimal. Understood?" "Sir, I understood, Sergeant." "Yes, sir. Understood. Reeves extended his hand. "You're one of the best snipers I've ever worked with, Chen. But more than that, you're a soldier who still remembers why we fight. Don't lose that. The military needs more people who think before they shoot, not fewer." Sarah shook his hand, left his office in a daze, found Danny waiting outside. "So," he asked, "how bad is it?" "It's not. He's covering for us." Danny let out a breath he'd been holding. "Thank God. I thought we were done." They walked back to the barracks in silence. Sarah's mind was racing. She'd killed Architect. The mission was complete. The world was arguably a safer place. But she couldn't stop thinking about that little girl, wondering if she'd heard about her father's death yet, hoping she hadn't seen it, hoping Sarah's delay had spared her at least that much trauma. "You think she'll be okay?" Danny asked, reading her thoughts. "The kid, I don't know, probably not, but at least she won't remember watching it happen. At least she won't have that specific nightmare." Is that enough? Sarah thought about her own father, remembered the day she got the news that he'd been killed in action, remembered the grief, the anger, the hole it left in her life. But she also remembered the pride, the knowledge that he'd died protecting others, that his sacrifice meant something. What would Architect's daughter remember? Would she hate Americans forever? Or would she, eventually, understand that her father's choices led to his end? Sarah would never know, but she'd given the girl a chance, a small mercy in a merciless war. "It has to be," Sarah said finally, "because if it's not enough, if we can't find ways to fight that leave room for mercy, for humanity, for children to grow up without that specific kind of trauma, then what are we even doing? We're just creating the next war, the next generation of enemies, the next targets." Danny nodded slowly. "So what now?" "Now we go back out. We do our job, but we do it with our eyes open. We remember that every target is a person, that every shot has consequences beyond the immediate mission. And when we can choose mercy without compromising the mission, even if it's just a small mercy like waiting a day, we choose it. That's not going to make us popular with command. I don't care about being popular. I care about being able to look at myself in the mirror, about being able to tell my own kids someday that I fought with honor, that I did what needed to be done, but I didn't lose myself in the process." The weight of that decision followed Sarah through the rest of her deployment. She took 3 more shots before the tour ended, each one clean, each one necessary, but each time she found herself scanning for collateral damage, for witnesses who didn't need to see what war really looked like, for children who might be watching. Her squad noticed the change, not in her effectiveness. Her accuracy remained perfect, her judgment sound, but there was something different in how she approached each mission, a deliberateness, a consideration of factors beyond wind speed and distance. One night, sitting in the mess hall, another sniper approached her. Staff Sergeant Mike Rodriguez, call sign Razor, had the most confirmed kills in the battalion. He was a legend, cold, efficient. The kind of sniper who never hesitated. "Heard an interesting story about you, Chen," he said, sitting down across from her. "Something about you passing on a shot." Sarah's jaw tightened. "You heard wrong, did I? Because what I heard is that you had Architect dead to rights, and you waited because his kid was there." Rodriguez leaned forward. "Want to know what I think about that?" Sarah prepared herself for criticism, for mockery, for the kind of harsh judgment that snipers reserved for anyone who showed what they perceived as weakness. "I think it took more balls than any shot I've ever taken," Rodriguez said quietly. "I've got 3 kids back home, and every time I pull the trigger, I wonder what kind of world I'm creating for them, whether I'm making it safer or just perpetuating the hate. You made a call that most of us don't have the guts to make. You chose the harder path because it was the right one." Sarah stared at him. "I thought you'd say I was soft." that I put the mission at risk. You completed the mission. That's what matters. But you did it in a way that maybe, just maybe, prevents the next war. That's not soft, that's smart. That's what we should all be doing, if we want this to actually end someday. Rodriguez stood up, extended his hand. Sarah shook it. Keep doing what you're doing, Chen. The military needs more snipers who think like you do, who remember that every target has a family, every shot has consequences, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is wait for the right moment instead of just taking the first one. After he left, Danny slid into the empty seat. Did that really just happen? Did Reza Rodriguez just compliment you for not taking the shot? I think he did. Danny shook his head. Maybe the world's changing after all. 3 years later, Sarah left the military, honorably discharged, decorated, respected. She became a firearms instructor, teaching the next generation of soldiers. But she also did something else. She started a program for veterans struggling with the moral weight of their combat actions. A place where snipers, pilots, infantry, anyone who'd taken a life could talk about the psychological burden, about the faces they couldn't forget, about the choices they'd made, and the ones they wished they could take back. The program grew, started with just a handful of veterans, meeting in a borrowed church basement. Within 2 years, it had expanded to 6 cities. Within 5, it was a recognized non-profit with funding from the VA and private donors. Sarah hired counselors, brought in veteran peer supporters, created workshops on moral injury and post-traumatic growth. But the heart of the program remained the same, a safe place where warriors could admit that carrying the weight was part of the job, that you didn't have to be ashamed of struggling with what you'd done, that questioning your choices didn't make you weak, it made you human. One day, the young Marine came to one of her sessions, fresh from his first deployment, haunted eyes, shaking hands. I took a shot, he said, clean, textbook, target eliminated. But there was a kid there, not in the line of fire, but close. She saw it, saw him go down, and I can't stop seeing her face, the way she screamed. Sarah sat down next to him. Tell me about it. And as he talked, she listened, really listened, because she knew exactly what he was carrying. The weight of a decision made in a split second that would echo for a lifetime. The knowledge that you did your job, followed orders, eliminated a threat, but at a cost that couldn't be measured in tactical terms. When he finished, his face wet with tears he'd probably been holding back for months, Sarah spoke. What you're feeling right now, that weight, that's not weakness, that's your humanity, refusing to let you forget that your actions have consequences, that lives matter, even enemy lives, even when those lives needed to be taken for the safety of others. So how do I live with it? The Marine asked. How do I move forward, knowing I traumatized a child? Sarah thought carefully before answering. You don't forget it. You don't minimize it. You don't tell yourself it doesn't matter because she was just collateral damage. You carry it. You let it inform every decision you make going forward. You use that weight to become someone who thinks carefully about the consequences of violence, who looks for alternatives when they exist, who never forgets that the people on the other end of your scope are human beings with families who love them. She paused. And you forgive yourself for doing your job in impossible circumstances. Because you didn't create this war. You didn't put that child in harm's way. Her father did that when he chose violence. Your job was to stop him from hurting others. The fact that it haunts you means you're a good person, caught in a bad situation. Don't lose that part of yourself. The Marine nodded slowly. Does it get easier? No, Sarah said honestly. But you get stronger. You learn to carry it. And eventually, you find ways to turn that pain into something useful, something that helps others. That's why I do this, why I started this program, because carrying the weight alone is crushing, but carrying it together, sharing it with people who understand, that's survivable. The letter, what Sarah didn't tell that young Marine, what she rarely told anyone, was that the nightmares never completely stopped. Even years after that mission in the mountain village, she'd wake up sometimes in the early morning hours, her heart pounding, seeing that little girl through her scope. Except in the dreams, she'd taken the shot. In the dreams, she'd followed orders without hesitation, and the child's screams echoed endlessly through the valley. Those dreams were worse than any of the 87 actual shots she'd taken, because they showed her who she could have become, who she almost became. A soldier so focused on the mission that she forgot the mission was supposed to be about protecting innocence, not creating more trauma in a world already drowning in it. Danny stayed in touch over the years. He'd remained in the service, made sergeant first class, trained new snipers at Fort Benning. They'd meet for coffee sometimes when he was on leave, and the conversation always drifted back to that day. "You know what's funny?" Danny said during one of these meetings, stirring sugar into his cup. "I've told that story, our story, to at least a dozen sniper candidates. Not officially, obviously, but when they ask about the hardest shot I ever had to make, I tell them about the shot you didn't take." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "And what do they say?" "Most of them don't get it at first. They're all about precision, speed, efficiency. They think hesitation gets people killed, but then I make them think it through, make them imagine that little girl growing up, and I ask them, do you want to create a future terrorist, or do you want to complete the mission with honor?" Usually, something clicks. They start to understand that being a sniper isn't just about marksmanship, it's about judgment. "Think command would approve of you telling that story?" Danny shrugged. "Colonel Reeves retired last year. Before he left, he pulled me aside and told me to keep telling it. Said the military needs more soldiers who think about second-order effects, about what happens after the shot. He called it strategic empathy. Said it might be the most important weapon we're not training people to use." Sarah smiled at that. Reeves had been one of the good ones, a commander who understood that wars weren't just won through firepower, but through winning hearts and minds, through showing that America's military power was tempered by restraint, by humanity. "I got something in the mail last month," Sarah said quietly, "from the State Department. They'd been monitoring that village, gathering intelligence on Architect's organization after we took him out. And his daughter, she's 14 now. According to their sources, she's attending school, wants to be a doctor. She's not involved in any extremist groups. She's not seeking revenge. She's just living her life, trying to build something positive out of the tragedy." Danny was quiet for a moment. "You think your decision made a difference in that?" "I don't know. Maybe she would have turned out that way regardless. But I like to think that not traumatizing her helped, that she remembers her father, grieves for him, but didn't have to witness the violence, didn't have that specific wound carved into her memory. That's got to feel good." "It does, but it also makes me think about all the other kids. The ones who did see violence, who did watch their parents die, who carry those scars." Sarah stared into her coffee. "We can't save them all, can't prevent every trauma. But when we have a choice, when we can complete the mission without adding to that burden, we have to take it." The conversation stayed with Sarah long after Danny left. She thought about all the snipers she'd trained, all the veterans she'd counseled, all the warriors trying to reconcile what they'd done with who they wanted to be. The military taught them to be weapons, precise and lethal, but it didn't always teach them how to be human again afterward. That's what her program was really about, not just processing trauma, but understanding that carrying the weight was part of the job, that you didn't have to be ashamed of the burden, but you couldn't ignore it either. You had to acknowledge it, examine it, learn from it. One veteran, a former Air Force pilot who'd called in strikes that killed enemy combatants along with civilians, once asked her, "How do you live with it? How do you reconcile the lives you took with the life you're trying to live now?" Sarah had thought carefully before answering. "You don't reconcile it. You integrate it. Those moments become part of who you are. They don't define you, but they inform you. Every life I took through that scope taught me something about the value of life, about how precious it is, about how careful we need to be with the power we're given. I live with it by honoring what those moments taught me, by using that knowledge to help others, by making sure that the hardest choices I made weren't in vain." The pilot had nodded, tears in his eyes. "I can work with that." And that's what they all did, in the end. They worked with it. They carried it. They transformed their pain and guilt and moral complexity into something useful, into wisdom, into a determination to be better, to teach better, to ensure the next generation of warriors understood the full weight of what they were taking on. Sarah Chen took 87 shots in her military career. 87 lives ended through her scope, but the shot she didn't take, the moment she chose to wait, to spare a child the sight of her father's death, that was the one she was most proud of. Not because the target didn't die, he did, but because Sarah proved that even in war, even when following orders, even when eliminating evil, there's still room for mercy, still room for humanity, still room to choose not just how we fight, but who we are when the fighting is done. That's the burden snipers carry, the weight of every trigger pull, the knowledge that their actions echo far beyond the immediate target, and the courage to sometimes wait, to choose a harder path, because not all victories are measured in confirmed kills. Some victories are measured in nightmares prevented, in children spared, in cycles broken. Sarah Chen understood that, and in understanding it, she became more than just a sniper. She became someone who fought not just to win wars, but to deserve the peace that might come after. If this story challenged how you think about warfare, about mercy under fire, about the impossible choices soldiers face, share it. Comment below about the moral complexities of combat, about the human cost of military decisions, about what it means to maintain your humanity in inhuman situations. Subscribe for more stories that don't just celebrate heroism, but explore the weight of the choices that define it. Because war is never simple, and the best warriors are the ones who never forget that.